Dynasty winners post free agency. Who increased value because of free agency? That's what we're talking about in today's video. As always, like and subscribe to the channel, guys. And we're just going to jump right into it. These are players from every position, a couple, 2-3 players from every position who I think increased in value due to free agency, whether they moved to another team, whether they stayed on their team and someone else moved, whatever it is. And we're going to start off with the quarterback position. The first up is Gardner Minshew, who's currently keep trade cut quarterback number 34, which I actually think is pretty low for him. I think there's a really good chance that Gardner Minshew is the starter for the Raiders in 2024. Whether we like it or not, whether it's good for the Raiders or not, I think there's a good chance that this is true. They paid him a good amount of money. Now, it's $25 million over 2 seasons, so it's not necessarily if they do have a better option, their hands are tied, they have to go with Minshew. But I think there's a good chance they're just going to roll with Minshew, and maybe they do draft a quarterback in the draft in the first round or second round, maybe at pick 13, or in the second round with the 13th pick of the second round. Maybe they grab a Penix or something like that. I don't know. But even if they do, I think there's still a pretty good chance that even if they get like a Bo Nix or a Michael Penix, that they do just roll with Minshew as their quarterback and let that player sit. I think they're totally fine with doing that. It's a new coaching staff that has some security under their belt. Antonio Pierce. I don't think they're going to fire him after a year. So they have some security. They don't have to rush things. They don't have to go all in, right? So Gardner Minshew, man, there was a good chance he went to a team just to be another backup, but I think it's like 75% chance that he's the starting quarterback for the Raiders. And I think he's an upgrade over Aiden O'Connell. So the fact that he's QB 34 and you're probably going to get QB 20 on the year in Superflex leagues, super good value for him. And if you're holding him in Dynasty, you just got a bump in value. So congratulations there. Next up, we have Sam Howell. Now, not really a free agent, but he was traded during this last week, this free agency period. He's QB 35 according to Keep Trade Cut, and Sam Howell's a very, very interesting one. Going all the way back to his college career, I think it was heading into the 2021 season where Howell was kind of looked at as like the QB1 of the draft class that he was going to come out in. And then he just kind of had a bad couple years in college, a bad year or two in college. And ever since then, he's been on a downward slope. Obviously, he was drafted as a 5th-round pick, got his chance last year. And don't forget, guys, I know he ended poorly, was sacked a ridiculous amount of times, and, was turning the ball over, just didn't look great, especially that second half of the season. Don't forget, though, the first 8 games of the year, first 8 weeks of the season, there was talks about, wow, did the Commanders find something with Sam Howell? Do they, is he the quarterback of the future? I think they were like 3-4 or something like that heading into like week 8 or something like that, right around there. So they were better than people thought. Now they only ended up winning 4 games. Sam Howell did not look great. He did start the whole season, but bad offensive line in Washington, not the greatest coaching situation as we saw. Now, I think if you are holding on to Sam Howell and you didn't sell him high at the point in the midpoint of the season, you got to be at least satisfied with where he went. It's an increase, in my opinion, rather than staying on the Commanders, because honestly, Commanders are drafting someone at 2 overall, and he's probably going to start the season, and I highly, highly doubt that they bench him. So basically, Sam Howell's only path to a starting role with Washington last year was through an injury. Now you go to Seattle, you're probably going to be the backup to Geno most likely, but Geno Smith, we know his story. He was a high 2nd-round pick, was a bust in New York, basically became a backup for the next several years, got his chance again, looked really good in 2022, and he kind of regressed a little bit in 2023. Injuries, all that stuff maybe played into it, but there's a chance that Geno Smith just isn't that good, that 2022 was a little bit of a fluke. And so I think it's the betting odds to be the starter week 1 is Geno Smith, but I don't think it's like a guarantee. So, new coaching staff in there, they have less loyalty towards Geno Smith. And even if Sam Howell sits for a year behind Geno Smith and then the team moves on, they're going to be in a pretty good spot, because honestly, they're not going to be in position, in my opinion, to draft a quarterback. They're not going to be drafting in the top 10 next year, most likely. They have too much talent on that team. They're probably going to be at worst, 15, 16, 17th, right? So if Sam Howell going to the Commanders, I think is a pretty good increase for him. Now on to the running backs. Got 3 running backs here for you. Gus Edwards coming in at running back 45, according to Keep Trade Cut. Today is March 17th, by the way. So if you're looking at another time later on, then it's probably changed. Gus Edwards over the last 30 days or so, really over the last week, has increased 20 spots ever since he signed with the Chargers. So he was RB 65. He's going to be RB 45 right now, and he's probably going to continue to go up. There's not much, if you have Gus Edwards, there's not much of a better spot you could have asked for than to go to the Chargers. This team is going to be top 5 in rushing attempts, almost guaranteed. They're going to run the ball 30 plus times a game. Gus Edwards with Greg Roman as his offensive coordinator. Gus Edwards has averaged over 5 yards a carry every year with Greg Roman as his offensive coordinator. So even if he only, I don't think he's going to be the only back in Los Angeles for the Chargers. I think they draft someone most likely, and they kind of split carries between the two of them. But Gus Edwards is probably going to get a lot of goal line stuff. This offense should be pretty efficient with a good running game and Justin Herbert at the quarterback position. And he's probably still, even with another running back there, going to get 12 to 15 carries a game. You get 12 to 15 carries. Let's say you get 15 carries a game. You average 4.5 yards per carry, right? You're looking at 70 yards, 65 yards a game, and with the occasional potential for double-digit touchdowns. Gus Edwards is just going to be a nice spot start running back, bench piece running back that you can throw in during bye weeks or if one of your guys gets hurt. And I think he's going to give you a nice 10 to 12 PPR points per game. So Gus Edwards, man, not much better of a spot. I know he's getting older, but I think this year, 2024, you can kind of lock him in. I think he's going to have a really good chance at being, RB 24 this year. So even if they bring someone else in. Next up, we have Zach Moss. Zach Moss was a free agent. Wasn't sure where he was going to go. Obviously, he looked good for Indianapolis when he filled in for Jonathan Taylor. He ends up signing with the Bengals after they let go of Mixon almost at the exact same time. He is RB 34 according to Keep Trade Cut. RB 33 now. He's increased 23 spots basically since free agency. A lot of people are expecting him to be the main guy in Cincinnati. Now, is that a guarantee? No, it's not, because Chase Brown is there, and I like Chase Brown, and I think Chase Brown is a very explosive player. However, what do the Bengals think of Chase Brown is the big thing. We're going to find out. We're going to see, but you got to be excited for Zach Moss at this moment, whether that means you try and trade him now on the assumption that, or, try to capitalize on people's assumptions that he's going to be the lead back for Cincinnati, and maybe he's not going to be, and you cash out, or you just hold on to him, you see what happens, and there's a potential you have kind of like the Joe Mixon of the Cincinnati Bengals, right? A player that's going to get some volume. So there's a good chance that he is that guy. There is a chance that Chase Brown's that guy. Either way, you saw a huge increase in value for Zach Moss, and you can either capitalize on that now and trade him away, or you can roll with it and you kind of cross your fingers and hope he's the RB1 for Cincinnati, which is obviously going to be pretty good value. I don't think there's a wrong answer either side. So go for it or hold them and see what you got when the season starts. And then finally, Zamir White, who's all the way up to RB21. Wow. He's increased 16 spots since basically free agency. Obviously, we saw Zamir White come in and fill in for Josh Jacobs and kind of just put up Josh Jacobs-like numbers, right? He was carrying the ball a ridiculous amount. He was catching the ball. He was scoring touchdowns. He looked good. And I think it's part of the reason why they didn't want to hand a bunch of money to Josh Jacobs, because they said, you know what? Zamir White came in, right? He averaged basically over 20 carries a game, 21 carries a game. Yeah, he had about 100 yards per game rushing. He caught the ball, right? He had 10 catches over the last 4 weeks. And they said, you know what, we can roll with that. Now, do I think Zamir White's going to be the only running back for the Raiders? Probably not. That's just doesn't seem like the DNA. Although when Antonio Pierce did take over, they just basically used Josh Jacobs and no one else. And then when Josh Jacobs was hurt, they used Zamir White and almost no one else, right? So maybe they do just roll with Zamir White. Maybe they do draft someone. Either way, if you have Zamir White, he had a huge increase in value, and he's now considered a top 24 running back. Do with that as you may, right? I'm kind of leaning towards potentially want to selling him if someone's going to overpay for that RB23 value, and he's probably only going to keep going up, right? Free agency's only been a week. It's only a week old for free agency, so his value is probably going to keep increasing. You could potentially cash out on him, or you could just roll with him and hope that he is the main back for the Raiders. Either way, I think he's going to be good this year, whether they draft someone or not. And there's a chance that he's a superstar because the Raiders are one of those teams that are going to run the hell out of the ball. So good for Zamir White. His value was a huge, huge increase. Onto the wide receiver position. Got 3 wide receivers for you. First up, probably not someone you're thinking I was going to start off with, is Curtis Samuel, wide receiver 64, according to Keep Trade Cut. And Curtis Samuel signed a nice deal with the Buffalo Bills. By the way, he's increased his value by 18 spots. So he was before free agency wide receiver 82. Now he's wide receiver 64. That's probably going to continue to go up. Curtis Samuel, man, he's flashed. He's an interesting player. I like Curtis Samuel. I always have liked his profile, liked his skill set. And I think his skill set is so unique that it doesn't really matter if he is kind of the third option on a team. He could still be pretty productive. We've seen that multiple years now with Curtis Samuel. 2020 with the Carolina Panthers. Teddy Bridgewater was the quarterback of the Panthers, and he gave fantasy relevant seasons, I think top 24, top 30 seasons to DJ Moore, Robbie Chosen Anderson, and Curtis Samuel. And part of the reason why is Curtis Samuel has a different skill set than most other receivers, right? We saw it last year with the Washington Commanders. He was, kind of the third option, even though I think he was second on the team in yards, but he was kind of the third option behind Dotson and McLaurin. And he was still benefiting from it because he can catch touchdowns. He can play in the slot. He can be used all over the field, and he gets carries. And I think this is kind of an underrated part of his game is the carry aspect of his game. He had 38 carries in 2022 for the Commanders. He had 41 carries in 2020 for the Carolina Panthers. And that's kind of what I need, man. If they give him, I know Stephon Diggs is there. I know Dalton Kincaid's there. Khalil Shakir is there. It's a little bit crowded. They could even draft someone, of course. But what if they don't? What if they kind of roll into the season with Diggs, a rookie receiver who's drafted in the 3rd round, Shakir? I think Curtis Samuel could be really, really good. He could kind of be that Cole Beasley-esque type of player for the Buffalo Bills. And if they do give him carries, which over the course of his career he has been given carries, then he doesn't need to get to 1,000 yards. He can get to 700 or 800 yards, throw on 200 more yards rushing, and you have a solid wide receiver 3, in my opinion. So Curtis Samuel, I like his skill set, and I think his skill set is perfect for, even though you are a third option for a team, you could still be pretty fantasy relevant because of the fact that you get carries. Next one's a pretty obvious one, Drake London. Nothing much else to say besides he's finally got a quarterback that's going to throw him the ball accurately. Hopefully Kirk Cousins is healthy with that Achilles injury, but we've seen Drake London, he moved from wide receiver 15. He's kind of moved up a couple tiers. He's wide receiver 9, according to Keep Trade Cut. So we know he has the ability. The quarterback play just hasn't been there. He could have a huge year in 2024. The number 1 wide receiver for Kirk Cousins over the last several years, whether it's Stephon Diggs, Adam Thielen, or Justin Jefferson, has been really, really good. Or even Jordan Addison there for a couple weeks. Man, you got to be excited. If you kind of have been holding on to Drake London the last 2 years and just been super disappointed by him, I don't think you're going to get consistency now. You're going to get consistency and a bump in production. You're not going to get games where Drake London has no catches. That's just not going to happen, right? Or 1 target or whatever. That's just not going to happen. You're going to get consistency. You're probably going to get a 1,200-plus yard receiver and a guy that could kind of profiles as a touchdown catcher, even though He only has 6 in his career. He kind of profiles as a touchdown guy. So not much else to say there. Kirk Cousins going to Atlanta is huge for the entire Falcons offense. And then last but not least is Marquise Brown here, who did sign with the Chiefs. He is wide receiver 34. I've always liked Marquise Brown. The last couple years with Arizona, he's had stretches of like top 12 wide receiver play. In 2022 with Kyler Murray, he was just being absolutely fed targets. It was ridiculous. Like he's not just a deep threat guy. I think we kind of think of him that way because that's how Baltimore kind of used him. You know, he is not like that. He had 90 catches with Baltimore. He had kind of on pace for like close to 100 catches with his first year in Arizona. You look at his numbers and his box score in Arizona before he got hurt. He had 11, 17, 11, 10 targets, 9 targets, and then he got hurt. But then he came back and still was getting 8+ targets. That was without Kyler Murray. Marquise Brown, I think he's a little bit more than a deep threat. Will Kansas City use him like that? I don't know. We'll see. But the fact of the matter is you see a guy who goes to Kansas City and he went from wide receiver 50, according to Keep Trade Cut, to wide receiver 34. Right? You see a guy that has the Kansas City next to his name. There's so much value to Kansas City. You can sell him as, he's on Kansas City. He's with Patrick Mahomes. He's going to be the number 2 option on the team, or maybe you can even argue the number 1 option, blah, blah, blah. The fact that he has Kansas City next to his name, it's just, the value is through the roof. So sell him if you want because of the Kansas City next to his name, the Kansas City Chiefs. Keep him if you want because you think he's going to be the number 2 option on this team. Whatever. Doesn't matter. You have Marquise Brown. You should be excited, right? Last up, guys, we have 2 tight ends. Now, I went a little deeper with the tight end position. Colby Parkinson is the first one. He was signed by the Los Angeles Rams. And I think that's pretty intriguing. We see him jump up 22 spots in the tight end rankings alone. So he literally went from tight end 61 on every team's waiver wire to tight end 39, and he's being picked up everywhere, right? So Colby Parkinson is a former 4th-round pick, never really got it going in Seattle. Now, Seattle's never really had a tight end give you fantasy relevant seasons, whether it's Jimmy Graham, Noah Fant, whoever. There's kind of 3 guys there. Colby Parkinson, if he is the starting tight end for the Rams, and Tyler Higbee's coming off a devastating injury in the playoffs, so he's going to miss at least the first 6 weeks. If Colby Parkinson is the starting tight end for the Rams, he's going to put up very similar numbers to what Tyler Higbee is. That's just how the Rams use their tight ends. He's going to give you 50 catches, 500 yards, and maybe a plus touchdown season of 6-7 touchdowns. That's going to be stream-worthy. Now, Davis Allen is there. Do they roll with the younger player? Is Colby Parkinson more of just a blocker / backup? They didn't really pay him that way. I thought he got a pretty decent contract. I'm just going to double-check that. They give him 3 years, $22.5 million. That's good money. I don't think they're bringing him in just for his blocking. So Colby Parkinson just could be a nice, solid streamer. I won a tight end premium dynasty league with Tyler Higbee starting every week except for his bye week. So you can win with a guy like Colby Parkinson if you build the entire team around it. So Colby Parkinson is one, and then Mike Gesicki is the other one. Mike Gesicki, who we've seen be good in the past, he's bumped up 11 spots according to Keep Trade Cut, up to tight end 37. Mike Gesicki, we saw one really good year from him in Miami. Of 700, 2 good years back to back. 2021 was his best though, 70 catches, almost 800 yards. But he had back-to-back 700-yard seasons. And then the new system comes in with Mike McDaniel, doesn't really value the style of tight end that Gesicki is, goes to New England. That's just a shit show. Now he finds himself on the Bengals. And you look at the Bengals tight ends under Joe Burrow, they're basically pencil them in for 40 to 50 catches, anywhere from 400 to 600 yards, and probably 4 or 5 touchdowns. Now, the one thing, because that's not super sexy, right? Maybe it's stream-worthy. Now, the one thing to note here is Tyler Boyd is probably no longer on the team. So this production of tight ends under Joe Burrow and the Bengals had come with Chase, Higgins, and Boyd on the team. Boyd's probably gone. That's going to play more into the tight end. Those kind of Boyd's targets probably leans more towards tight end targets. What if Gesicki is now the third option instead of Tyler Boyd? There's a chance for that. There is a chance that Gesicki's the third option, and instead of 40 or 50 catches, we're talking 60 or 70 catches, and we're talking 650 to 800 yards, and who knows with touchdowns? They're so hard to predict. So I think this is a intriguing spot. Now, could the Bengals draft a tight end? Of course. Could they bring in a wide receiver? Of course. But as where we sit right now, I kind of like Gesicki and having a decent year. So those are some players, some winners in terms of their dynasty values post free agency. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. We're going to be putting out a losers video next. As always, like and subscribe, and we'll catch you guys on next time.